Stop your bloody whinging, Marge!
Gordon Ramsay?
Gordon Ramsay is a television celebrity and an accomplished chef. Patience is not his strong suit.
I don't remember ordering any stinky old cheeses.
He doesn't star in Heaven's Kitchen. It's called Hell's Kitchen. Check out the top 10 times Gordon Ramsay was confused over a dish on Hell's Kitchen. No wonder you're confused.
What's happening?
Most of us assume that if someone teaches a particular subject, they must know a lot about it. You might even call them an expert. Chef Gordon Ramsay, for example, is an expert when it comes to food and cooking.
Let me hit you with some knowledge.
He became confused on an episode of Hell's Kitchen when he learns one of his contestants is a cooking teacher. When Gordon asked, "Who's cooked the diapers?" you knew someone was in for it. The contestant explained that she'd prepared smoked chicken enchiladas, not diapers. Gordon tasted the dish, but promptly spit the offending food into a trash can. Later in the episode, he exploded at the so-called cooking teacher and exclaimed, "No wonder you're confused." The unfortunate contestant had overfilled several pots of boiling water with spaghetti and then wondered why it took so long to cook it. Boiling water and cooking spaghetti is about as basic as it gets in the kitchen, so her confusion was confusing.
Are you wearing a diaper?
No.
Beat it.
Get out!
We know that stress can cause people to make mistakes they otherwise wouldn't make, but Gordon expects his cooks to meet a high standard. During a stressful dinner service, everyone scrambles to prepare the dishes that customers order. So Gordon was understandably confused when one of his cooks decided to prepare a beet salad. No one had ordered a beet salad. Gordon responded with one of his characteristically sarcastic remarks, asking the cook if he was hearing voices in his head. The frazzled young man had no answer for Chef Ramsay and did not admit to hearing any voices.
Liar!
Apparently, he thought he heard someone tell him to make a beet salad, but it all seems so random. Of all the things you could not hear someone order, why would it be a beet salad? Who would order a beet salad on Hell's Kitchen?
A can of beets?
Yes, beets are good for you and are sometimes touted as a superfood, but come on, a beet salad? This is the really confusing part of the story. If you're going to hear a phantom order, why not make it a cheeseburger or a delicious piece of cheesecake? Do you want tuna with that?
I like the tuna here. No one likes a tuna here. Yeah, well, I do.
Vegetarians sometimes eat animal-based products like milk and eggs, but draw the line at meat, chicken, and fish. Vegans, on the other hand, try not to eat anything that comes from an animal. Maybe the contestant on an episode of Hell's Kitchen who asked Chef Ramsay if he could add tuna to a vegetarian salad can be excused in the interests of clarity. Some people who call themselves vegetarians would eat a salad with tuna in it. Technically, vegetarians who allow themselves to eat fish are called pescatarians. Chef Gordon Ramsay was having none of it though, and he was clearly confused and irritated by the contestant's question. Vegetarians can get upset when they order a meatless dish and then are presented with meat, or in this case, even a little tuna fish.
The customer is always right.
Exactly.
This question about tuna was a relatively minor violation compared to what some other contestants have done on Hell's Kitchen, but anyone who has seen the show knows Gordon Ramsay's tolerance for mistakes and confusion are pretty low.
Its name is the recipe, you...
You're a plank.
It is raw, young lady. You're gonna kill someone.
An executive chef named Chris was a contestant on Hell's Kitchen who offered up a dish he described as salmon, roasted on a plank of cedar wood. This method of cooking salmon on a cedar plank has a long history with Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest. Traditionally, this dish was cooked over an open wood or coal fire, but modern chefs usually prepare this dish in their kitchen. As you probably guessed, Chef Gordon Ramsay was not impressed with this presentation, and he was left a little dazed and confused. Chris explained that the fish had been cooked medium rare, which was the way he'd eat it, but Gordon declared that the fish was much closer to being raw than medium rare. Gordon himself was in rare form and called Chris a plank. He explained that a plank means an idiot. Ramsay was apparently confused about Chris's decision to focus on the cedar plank presentation at the expense of paying attention to the actual condition of the salmon. Chris didn't understand the intensity of Chef Ramsay's reaction, but he should have known exactly how the chef would react.
Look up idiot in the dictionary. You know what you'll find?
Picture me.
Silence of the Tartare. Andrew, a farmer and contestant on Hell's Kitchen, has apparently confined himself to only eating the animals that he butchers himself. But Andrew also prefers raw food, as he explained to a confused Gordon Ramsay when he presented a dish he was obviously very proud of. He chose to prepare steak tartare, which is a fancy way of saying he likes to eat raw meat. Raw ground beef is not for everyone, but raw steak served with a raw egg and an assortment of spices is certainly an accepted part of fine dining. The trouble with Andrew is that he seems to enjoy butchering animals and eating their raw meat a little too much. Putting Andrew's somewhat odd tastes aside for the moment, the really important thing is whether or not Gordon liked the dish. He took a nibble and dismissed it as bland.
Bland? Yeah.
Perhaps he forgot to use the assortment of spices as most steak tartare recipes call for. During one clip, the unconventional cook explained that he wanted to win Hell's Kitchen so he could buy a pair of walk-in coolers. It seems that Andrew would have to go back to the drawing board with his recipe and wait a bit longer for his walk-in coolers.
This is a joke. This is an insult to catering.
Nailed it.
God, dear, oh dear. It absolutely stinks.
Gordon's style might be summed up as annoyance fueled by impatience. He does not stand for foolish behavior and will pounce at the first sign of weakness. A good example of this phenomenon was a professional chef named Chad. When he declared, "I nailed it," just before he presented his dish to Chef Ramsay, viewers well knew he was in for a rude awakening. So why didn't he know he was about to get torched?
I don't think you can actually cook.
The dish he was so proud of was a black garlic and tuna recipe that seemed to hold promise. This sounds like a tasty dish, but one look at it and you realize something must have gone wrong because the fish has been soaked and slathered with dark goo. Chef Ramsay asked him why so heavily doused in black garlic. Chad had no answer, so Gordon and the viewers were left wondering about whether this is what he intended for his tuna recipe or if his recipe simply got away from him in the midst of the turmoil. A lot of turmoil surrounds the contestants on Hell's Kitchen, but they have to be mindful to not confuse Chef Ramsay, or they are likely to feel his wrath. Absolutely dog.
I will not eat that!
Cocky isn't a very good stance to adopt when going up against Gordon Ramsay on his Hell's Kitchen show. A contestant named Andrew tried to come in hot on Ramsay with what he called Andrew's absolute penne. Penne pasta dishes are generally popular and not terribly difficult to make, so perhaps he hadn't put his bar too high. Unfortunately for Andrew, Gordon had to remind him that he gives the attitude, not the contestants. With one taste of the penne pasta dish, Ramsay demonstrated he was confused about this contestant's attitude, but not about his opinion of the dish. He called the penne absolutely dog shit. Obviously, this was not the reaction Andrew was hoping for.
Bickering with you created unnecessary stress on the rest of the team.
Flippant and cocky behavior is not appreciated unless it's coming from Gordon himself, because he's the star. Andrew seemed to have gotten confused about how to handle himself, but Gordon reminded him pretty quickly to focus on his cooking. Say it ain't so, Joe.
You're pulling my plonker now, aren't you?
A contestant on Hell's Kitchen named Joe seemed to be in over his head when he prepared a lobster dish for Chef Ramsay. Joe was supposed to be making a delicious lobster salad, but when he presented his dish to Ramsay, it appeared to be incomplete. Chef Ramsay did not hide his confusion. In fact, he actually lifted up the nearly empty plate and asked, "Where's the lobster?" Joe was visibly upset and was reluctant to answer the question, but he was on the hot seat and was expected expected to answer the chef immediately. His answer only increased Gordon's confusion, which was, "I tasted a piece." It looked like he tasted more than a piece because there was very little of anything on the plate. It's understood that cooks taste their food to see if it's the way they want it. Sampling is one thing, but eating most of the entree is something else entirely. Joe's fellow contestants clearly took delight in his predicament and couldn't really stifle a round of snickering at his expense. Ironically, what little lobster Gordon could find on the plate was met with his approval.
However, lobster's cooked beautifully, nice flavor.
This was good news to be sure, but Chef Gordon's confusion about the missing lobster seemed to far outweigh his positive reaction to the food he could find on the plate. As Gordon reminded Joe, Hell's Kitchen is a cooking contest, not an eating contest. Dropped my mango.
Ooh, burn!
Flambe is French for flaming and is a technique used to create some traditional and elegant desserts that require a delicate touch. The food is covered with liquor such as rum or brandy, then lit on fire. Play with fire and you can easily end up with a charred, sticky mess, so aspiring chefs have to be careful. Mango Banana Foster is one example of this flaming treat, and that's exactly what the contestants had to make. One contestant, Michael, had a hard time with this one. As the seconds were ticking down, he goes to transfer his mango from the pan to the plate and drops it on the table. He still plates it and presents it to Gordon, saying, "I dropped my mango and made a big mess." Ramsay takes a bite anyways, and surprisingly has some nice things to say about the taste. So you're left thinking that maybe Michael actually saved the dish. But Ramsay isn't done. Gordon then tells Michael that his plate looks like Jimmy's.
Dirty plate. I'm not happy with that.
Jimmy, also a contestant, has a reputation for serving dirty plates, much to Ramsay's chagrin. Then, in what has to be the most confusing part of all, Gordon makes his way over to Dirty Plate Jimmy after having just made that comment about him and actually enjoys his flambe. So much so that Jimmy actually somehow wins this challenge. What? The boiling water.
I want to watch you boil.
I can't do it with you watching.
Boiling water is one of the most basic skills anyone who cooks has to master, so you would think this would cause absolutely no confusion for Chef Ramsay. However, a contestant on season 1 of Hell's Kitchen did just that when Ramsay asked why the spaghetti wasn't ready. The young woman answered that she was waiting for a rolling boil before adding the pasta. Ramsay then asked her if she had added cold water to the pot. She admitted that she had indeed added cold water because she thought cold water boiled faster than hot water. The chef's confused reply was a succinct but devastating "What?"
Donkey!
He was clearly frustrated and confused by the contestants' basic cooking skills, or lack thereof. Some believe cold water boils faster than warm water, but this misconception was addressed by the publication Scientific American. As common sense would suggest, the publication explained that warm water boils faster than cold water because it is closer to the temperature you want it to be. This would seem like enough to put the matter to rest.
Yes, science!
But it didn't help the young cook avoid the embarrassment that comes with being called out by Ramsay on national television.
Give up. Good move. Leave the cooking to the real chefs.
For more sweet videos, just tap that screen, show some love, and click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell.